On September 27, 2020, as the clock ticked toward the evening, a 911 call came through, barely audible above the sound of the woman's own sobs. "I shot him in self-defense. I was protecting myself." The officer on duty would soon discover something he hadn't anticipated. Doug Benefield, a 58-year-old man, laid lifeless in his pool of blood in his estranged wife's mother's home, located at 1513 East 24th Street, Lakewood Ranch, Florida. What made this murder heartbreaking? Doug wasn't just another man in the wrong place at the wrong time. Doug had a life full of promise, with a breakthrough appointment scheduled just hours later that day. In what should have been the beginning of something significant, Doug would never make it out alive. His story, his life, was tragically cut short. But what happened in those final moments? How did a marriage, once filled with love and dreams, descend into this chilling act of violence? Here's where things take a turn you wouldn't expect. The woman accused of his brutal death was none other than his wife, Ashley Benefield. Once known for her grace as a ballet dancer, nicknamed the Black Swan for her elegance and beauty. But now, that nickname would forever take on an unsettling, eerie significance. Ashley, after shooting Doug, called 911 not in an attempt to save him, but to ensure that he wouldn't live to tell the story. Her frantic voice was heard pleading for help, but what did she really need help with? Was this really a case of self-defense or something far more deliberate, cold, and calculating? What caused Ashley to shoot her husband that fateful night in cold blood? How did a once promising marriage descend into a deadly conflict? Was this truly a tragic accident? Or did Ashley, driven by something deeper, orchestrate Doug's death with careful planning and precision? The real question here is, what went wrong in their relationship? What triggered Ashley to fire the fatal shots that ended Doug's life? Was it a series of unfortunate events, or had the cracks in their marriage been there all along, hidden beneath the surface? Could the warning signs have saved Doug? Did anyone, perhaps even Doug himself, ignore those subtle red flags that might have helped avoid this tragedy? Today we will take a closer look at Doug's story, Ashley's motives, and the chilling confession that changed everything. As Ashley's actions are laid bare, we are left to ponder. Was this simply a moment of self-defense? Or was it something far more insidious? What was Ashley hiding? What could have been done to prevent this loss? In every relationship there are warning signs, small gestures, looks, words that often go unnoticed or dismissed. But sometimes, it's the things we ignore that lead to the most unimaginable outcomes. Have you ever overlooked the small signs? Have you ever turned a blind eye because you wanted to believe the best in someone? How many times do we ignore the things that we should be paying attention to, hoping that we're wrong? Today we explore Doug's story and Ashley's decisions, attempting to piece together the fractured relationship that ended so tragically. Was it truly self-defense? Or did Ashley orchestrate a cold, calculated act of violence? What were the moments that led up to this? Let's explore the facts together, piece by piece. You're watching Bruised Voice, the place where untold stories of betrayal and tragedy are given a voice. If you want to learn more about how to protect the ones you love, how to spot the signs of potential danger, and hear more real-life true crime stories, hit the subscribe button now. Don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Your engagement helps us keep telling these important stories, so we can all be more aware of the dangers lurking in plain sight. Doug Benefield, 58, was not merely a former Navy veteran or a technology consultant. He was a man whose life had been defined by service, to his country, to his family, and to his principles. For decades, Doug devoted himself to the well-being of those he loved, particularly his two children, who were at the heart of his daily existence. To friends and relatives, Doug was the embodiment of reliability. He was the man who would never miss a school event, a recital, or a milestone in the lives of his children. Even in moments of private stress or professional demands, Doug made it clear that his children were his priority. Every decision he made, every plan he devised, was filtered through the lens of their welfare. His extended family described him as a quiet force of stability. Conversations with his parents, if they were still alive, were a daily fixture, offering guidance and support, not just to Doug but through him to his own children. Neighbors remember him tending to mundane tasks with care and diligence, always greeting others with a nod or a quiet word of advice, never seeking recognition, yet earning it through consistent, dependable actions. In the small suburban streets of Lakewood Ranch, Florida, Doug's presence was felt not as a spectacle, but as a stabilizing influence, a pillar of ordinary but profound reliability. Doug's relationship with Ashley Benefield began in 2016, when he was 54 and she was 24, a former ballerina with the aspirations of an artist and the charisma of someone accustomed to the spotlight. Their meeting at a Republican Party fundraiser seemed serendipitous, though the age difference was immediately notable. Within 13 days they had married, a union that would soon be marked by contrasts as much as connections. Doug's vision of family life, carefully curated spaces for children, plans for education and leisure, weekends filled with bonding, was meticulous and attentive. Each room in their home, each milestone in the children's lives, was attended to with devotion and care. Ashley, in turn, brought her own ambitions and discipline. The American National Ballet was her pride, her professional achievement, and she invested herself deeply in the training of students and the production of performances. She seemed to embrace Doug's family-centered world initially, yet cracks soon appeared. Neighbors noted small signs, arguments whispered through closed doors, her involvement in ballet increasingly taking her away from family activities, and Doug's frustration when plans for the children were interrupted. Friends recall conversations where Ashley voiced feelings of confinement, where she sought independence and recognition for her own achievements. Doug's attempts to balance these dynamics were often unrecognized, leading to tension that simmered beneath a calm exterior. Lakewood Ranch itself is a community where appearances are often carefully curated. From the outside, Doug and Ashley presented as the ideal suburban couple. He, a disciplined, methodical professional devoted to his children. She, a graceful, accomplished artist, contributing to the cultural life of the community. On weekend drives, neighbors might have glimpsed Doug with his children, smiling at their antics, or Ashley rehearsing a solo routine in the local park. Outwardly, all was normal, harmonious, and enviable. Yet behind closed doors, the marriage bore the weight of unmet expectations, unvoiced grievances, and ambitions that clashed. Doug's dedication extended to the minutiae of everyday life. He maintained schedules, oversaw homework, celebrated academic and artistic achievements, and ensured that his children felt secure, even when the underlying tension at home was palpable. Friends and family recall that even when disagreements arose with Ashley, Doug's focus remained on maintaining a safe, nurturing environment for their children. It was a testament to his character that, despite any personal frustrations, he prioritized the emotional stability and well-being of his family above all else. The psychological landscape of this family, however, was complex. While Doug maintained order and consistency, Ashley's desires for autonomy and control increasingly disrupted the balance. Sources suggest that the tension was compounded by custody disputes, the pressures of parenthood, and Ashley's professional ambitions. The intersection of Doug's structured life and Ashley's pursuit of independence created a volatile dynamic that no observer could fully appreciate until the tragic events of September 27, 2020. At the heart of this profile is a man whose intentions were clear: to provide, protect, and nurture. His every action was guided by a deep-seated sense of responsibility and love. And yet, even in a world meticulously organized around care, routine, and devotion, human relationships can fracture in ways that defy anticipation. The question lingers: despite his diligence, his devotion, and his foresight, could anyone have foreseen the trajectory of this marriage? What subtle cues went unnoticed? What emotional distances went unbridged? And as our narrative moves toward the fateful day at Ashley's mother's home, I leave you, my audience, to consider how the very fabric of trust, commitment, and familial love can be undone in a single violent instant. By mid-2020, Ashley and Doug Benefield had been living separately for months. Their young daughter became the center of repeated disputes, custody battles that left both parents under constant psychological strain. Court documents indicate Ashley had filed a restraining order against Doug, citing emotional abuse. Doug, a Navy veteran and technology consultant, was actively asserting his visitation rights, trying to maintain the parental bond he had nurtured since his child's birth. Observers noted the couple's tension escalated over time, intensifying with each failed attempt to negotiate custody amicably. Ashley, a former ballet dancer and founder of the American National Ballet in Charleston, South Carolina, applied the same precision and discipline she had cultivated in dance to her private life. Legal filings, scheduling of moves, and household planning reflected her meticulous nature. Public records also show Ashley had begun a new relationship, adding complexity and friction to the already strained dynamic. Neighbors and acquaintances recalled numerous heated arguments. Ashley alleged Doug had attempted to poison her with heavy metals, a claim reported to authorities. While the allegations were not substantiated, they contributed to a climate of fear and uncertainty. Prosecutors later argued that Ashley's desire to maintain exclusive custody of her daughter, combined with her personal motivations, fueled escalating tension. In the weeks leading to September 27th, Ashley reportedly planned the circumstances that would bring Doug to her mother's home. She arranged for him to help pack for an imminent move to Maryland, a routine act intended to appear cooperative, yet fraught with potential for confrontation. Public reports indicate that Ashley requested time off work, ensuring she would be present and able to control the environment. Despite the outwardly mundane nature of the day, the underlying psychological pressure was immense. Ashley had accumulated a series of legal steps designed to remove Doug from the family sphere entirely. Custody proceedings, restraining orders, and her personal relationships created a volatile backdrop, setting the stage for the tragic events that would follow. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Ashley and Doug were alone in the bedroom of her mother's home. According to court records, the confrontation escalated rapidly. Ashley, armed with Doug's legally owned firearm, fired 3 shots, striking him in the torso. Doug fell to the floor, his life extinguished in seconds. Ashley remained beside him, calm, giving the officers her account when they arrived after her 911 call. The details indicate that Ashley's actions were deliberate. She controlled the environment, ensuring privacy and timing. The firearm, legally registered to Doug, became the instrument of death in her hands. Media reports and police records confirm the trajectory and placement of the gunshots, shell casings on the floor, and blood patterns that forensic investigators meticulously documented. Neighbors and first responders described a surreal calm in the aftermath. The home, once a space of familial routine, was now silent and marked by violence. Officers discovered Doug on the bedroom floor, bleeding from 3 gunshot wounds. Ashley remained at the scene, claiming self-defense, while investigators began piecing together the sequence of events that led to the shooting. Following the shooting, police secured the scene, interviewing neighbors and family. Ashley was taken into custody without incident. Her daughter was not present during the incident, yet the custody battle was central to understanding Ashley's motivations. Prosecutors later emphasized the premeditation suggested by her careful planning, her time-off requests, and control over the environment. Doug's family, including his cousin Tommy Benefield, publicly expressed a mixture of grief and confusion. While they had hoped for a murder conviction, they expressed some satisfaction with the manslaughter verdict, acknowledging the complexity of Ashley's claims of self-defense. Media coverage highlighted the psychological dimensions of the case, comparing the real-life events to the Black Swan film narrative that inspired the case's nickname. Public debate focused on custody disputes, domestic conflicts, and the signs of escalating tension that, if noticed earlier, might have prevented the tragedy. As officers from the Manatee County Sheriff's Office arrived at Ashley's mother's Lakewood Ranch home on September 27, 2020, the scene was unnervingly quiet. The house, which had only hours before been filled with the bustle of packing for an impending move, now carried a tension that was nearly tangible. Blood spatter analysis indicated that the shots had been fired at very close range, 3 times, striking Doug in the torso. Forensic teams worked to reconstruct the scene, measuring distances, angles, and the positions of both Ashley and Doug during the moments leading to the fatal shots. Ashley's clothing, still stained with blood, was preserved as evidence. Investigators documented every mark, every tear, and every detail that could provide insight into whether this confrontation had been sudden or orchestrated. Phone records, text messages, and digital activity were obtained to trace interactions between Ashley and Doug in the hours and days leading up to the shooting. Witness statements were gathered from friends, family, and neighbors. Accounts varied, but a common thread emerged. The couple's relationship had been fraught with tension, particularly around custody issues involving their daughter. Ashley had filed restraining orders, while Doug had pursued visitation rights. Investigators noted that these legal actions, combined with prior reports of conflict, created a context in which the confrontation could escalate. Court filings and public records added further detail. Ashley had allegedly accused Doug of emotional abuse and claimed he attempted to poison her with heavy metals, claims that were investigated but not substantiated by evidence. These allegations, however, shaped the narrative of tension and distrust, and they became an essential element in understanding her motive. Investigators had to parse through these claims while maintaining objectivity, distinguishing between emotion, accusation, and factual evidence. Responding deputies quickly secured the perimeter, ensuring that the home and all occupants were safe. They took note of the small details: the arrangement of furniture, the open suitcase near the bed, boxes scattered across the floor, and realized that this was more than a spontaneous confrontation. The firearm, legally owned by Doug but fired by Ashley, was carefully catalogued. Officers documented its placement and collected it as critical evidence. Neighbors were questioned immediately. Many recalled seeing Doug arrive earlier that day to assist Ashley with packing, an act that seemed routine and cooperative. The officers' attention, however, was drawn to the way Ashley had interacted with the arriving deputies. Her calm demeanor, the lack of panic, and her precise recounting of events. Something about her comportment suggested that this situation required more scrutiny than a simple self-defense claim. Investigators began a meticulous examination of the bedroom, the scene of the shooting. Shell casings were found near the bed, alongside traces of blood that mapped the trajectory of the bullets. Blood spatter analysis indicated that the shots had been fired at very close range, 3 times, striking Doug in the torso. Forensic teams worked to reconstruct the scene, measuring distances, angles, and the positions of both Ashley and Doug during the moments leading to the fatal shots. Ashley's clothing, still stained with blood, was preserved as evidence. Investigators documented every mark, every tear, and every detail that could provide insight into whether this confrontation had been sudden or orchestrated. Phone records, text messages, and digital activity were obtained to trace interactions between Ashley and Doug in the hours and days leading up to the shooting. Witness statements were gathered from friends, family, and neighbors. Accounts varied, but a common thread emerged. The couple's relationship had been fraught with tension, particularly around custody issues involving their daughter. Ashley had filed restraining orders, while Doug had pursued visitation rights. Investigators noted that these legal actions, combined with prior reports of conflict, created a context in which the confrontation could escalate. Court filings and public records added further detail. Ashley had allegedly accused Doug of emotional abuse and claimed he attempted to poison her with heavy metals, claims that were investigated but not substantiated by evidence. These allegations, however, shaped the narrative of tension and distrust, and they became an essential element in understanding her motive. Investigators had to parse through these claims while maintaining objectivity, distinguishing between emotion, accusation, and factual evidence. Psychologists and domestic violence experts were consulted to assess Ashley's behavior and the potential for premeditation. Analysts reviewed patterns of coercion, prior conflicts, and the timing of Ashley's request for time off work. These experts were asked to consider whether the shooting could have been anticipated based on known behaviors or whether it was a sudden, isolated incident. Despite her calm demeanor and detailed recounting of events, inconsistencies began to surface. While Ashley maintained that she acted in self-defense, the physical evidence, bullet trajectories, blood spatter patterns, and the absence of defensive wounds on her body suggested a more complex scenario. Investigators began to question whether this had been a calculated act masked as self-defense, or whether there were nuances in the marital dynamic that had led to this tragic outcome. As the forensic teams worked late into the night, each piece of evidence, each testimony, and each digital trace added layers to the investigation. The picture of what occurred in that bedroom was gradually taking shape, but questions remained. Why did Ashley shoot Doug 3 times? Was the argument truly escalating toward violence, or had she orchestrated the encounter knowing exactly what would happen? And perhaps most haunting of all, could Doug's death have been prevented if someone had intervened earlier? This investigation was only beginning, and the answers it would reveal would challenge perceptions, expose tensions, and illuminate the fine line between conflict, control, and deadly consequence. Ballistics experts reconstructed the shooting, confirming that the gunfire was deliberate and precise. The evidence indicated that Doug had not posed an immediate lethal threat at the moment of the shooting, a fact that investigators found critical in evaluating Ashley's self-defense claim. Within hours, Ashley was formally arrested by the Manatee County Sheriff's Office. She was charged with second-degree murder, a serious felony that carried a potential sentence of decades in prison. The arrest made national headlines, quickly dubbed the Black Swan murder, due to Ashley's former career as a professional ballet dancer and the case's eerie parallels with the psychological tension portrayed in the 2010 film. Law enforcement documented every detail meticulously. The firearm, legally registered to Doug, was seized and logged as key evidence. Officers cataloged shell casings, blood spatter, and the positions of furniture and objects in the bedroom, all of which would later become critical pieces of the trial. Investigators noted Ashley's calm demeanor, her composed recounting of events, and her insistence that she had acted to protect herself. Yet questions lingered. Had this been a sudden escalation, or had the confrontation been orchestrated? The trial began months later, with jurors, attorneys, and observers closely examining the dynamics of Ashley and Doug's marriage. Prosecutors painted a picture of escalating tension, emphasizing Ashley's desire to secure sole custody of their young daughter and prevent Doug from seeing her. Public records and court filings demonstrated that Ashley had previously filed complaints of emotional abuse, while Doug had pursued visitation rights, leading to months of legal battles and family strife. Family members took the stand, recounting the years of discord between the couple. Doug's relatives testified to his dedication as a father, his commitment to his work, and the love he had for his child despite the strained marriage. They described Ashley's frequent accusations against Doug and her ongoing legal maneuvers to limit his access, suggesting a deliberate pattern of control. Witnesses, including neighbors and acquaintances, detailed heated arguments, observed tension in their interactions, and the chilling sense that conflicts often escalated beyond reason. Ashley's defense team argued that she had acted in self-defense, citing past claims of emotional abuse and alleged threats. Her attorneys presented testimony about Doug's behavior, including his role as a former Navy veteran and the age difference between the couple, highlighting dynamics that, in their view, could have contributed to Ashley's perception of threat. They emphasized that Doug had allegedly attempted to exert control and intimidation, framing Ashley's actions as protective rather than premeditated. Prosecutors countered with evidence of planning. Ashley had arranged to be alone with Doug on the day of the incident, requested time off work, and controlled the environment of the confrontation. Ballistics reports, eyewitness statements, and 911 call logs were presented to the jury, illustrating the precise sequence of events leading to Doug being fatally shot 3 times in the bedroom of Ashley's mother's home. Digital evidence, including communications and scheduling records, was introduced to demonstrate that the incident was not a spontaneous act but had elements of forethought. Expert witnesses in psychology and domestic dynamics were called to testify about the implications of custody disputes, power struggles, and coercive behaviors in marital relationships. Their testimony underscored the pressures and escalating emotional tension in the months prior to the shooting. As the trial unfolded, jurors were faced with a difficult task: to determine whether Ashley Benefield had acted in a genuine state of fear for her life, or whether the shooting was a calculated attempt to remove Doug from her life and secure sole custody of their daughter. Every piece of evidence, from shell casings to witness testimony, added weight to the question of intent. The courtroom drama intensified as expert testimony raised questions about Ashley's mental state, her previous accusations against Doug, and the degree to which each parent's actions contributed to the volatile environment. Could this tragic event have been prevented? Was Doug truly a threat, or had Ashley meticulously orchestrated the final confrontation? In the eyes of the jury, the line between self-defense and calculated action was blurred. Each testimony, each exhibit, and each statement painted a complex, troubling picture of a marriage gone awry, with consequences that would reverberate far beyond the courtroom. The courtroom in Manatee County, Florida, was charged with a tense, almost tangible energy. After months of testimony, witness accounts, and expert analysis, the moment had arrived for the judge to deliver justice. Judge took the bench to pronounce sentence on Ashley Benefield, the 32-year-old former ballerina who had fatally shot her estranged husband, Doug Benefield, on September 27, 2020. Doug, 58, a former Navy veteran and devoted father, lay dead in the bedroom of Ashley's mother's home 5 years prior, his life cut short by 3 gunshots. The case had captured national attention, dubbed the Black Swan murder trial, both for Ashley's former ballet career and the chilling psychological elements that seemed to echo the eponymous film. As the judge began, the gravity of the situation was clear. The court recounted the facts: the couple's rapid marriage, the age gap of 30 years, the custody battles, and the sequence of events that had culminated in Doug's death. Evidence presented in court had shown that Ashley had arranged to have Doug at her mother's home, controlling the environment, and that the shooting had occurred in the bedroom, leaving Doug dead from 3 gunshot wounds. The judge sentenced Ashley Benefield to 20 years in state prison for the conviction of manslaughter. The sentence reflected the jury's verdict, which found her guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter rather than second-degree murder, acknowledging both the premeditated elements presented by prosecutors and the claims of self-defense advanced by the defense. The courtroom absorbed every word. Ashley, seated in the defendant's chair, appeared calm but visibly impacted, the reality of her sentence weighing heavily. The judge's ruling also revoked her $100,000 bond, mandating that Ashley begin serving her term immediately at the Florida Department of Corrections. The courtroom murmurs reflected a mix of relief, shock, and contemplation. Relief for Doug's family that a verdict had been reached, shock at the tragedy of a former ballerina becoming a killer, and contemplation of how domestic conflicts could escalate to irreversible violence. The judge emphasized several factors in delivering the sentence. The deliberate nature of the shooting, including Ashley's control over the circumstances and her ability to isolate Doug. The influence of ongoing custody disputes, which contributed to the tension and ultimate fatal confrontation. Ashley's mental state, background as a disciplined ballet dancer, and awareness of the consequences of her actions. As Ashley was led away to begin her sentence, the public was left to ponder, could this tragedy have been prevented? Were the warning signs of escalating tension and emotional manipulation visible to those around her? And, more hauntingly, what long-term effects would this have on the young daughter who lost her father in such violent circumstances? The story of Ashley and Doug Benefield, once a tale of love, ambition, and artistry, had transformed into a case study of domestic conflict, legal strategy, and irreversible tragedy. Every decision, every argument, every unresolved tension had culminated in a single life-altering act, leaving a community to grapple with questions that would not easily be answered. Following the trial and sentencing, Ashley Benefield began serving her prison term at the Florida Department of Corrections, the courtroom verdict marking the start of her 20-year sentence for manslaughter. Doug Benefield, the 58-year-old Navy veteran and devoted father, could no longer witness the unfolding impact of the events that followed his death. The young daughter, central to the custody dispute that had escalated tensions between the couple, was left to navigate a world abruptly stripped of one parent while the other parent faced incarceration. Family members of Doug Benefield spoke publicly of the grief and ongoing adjustments they now faced. Relatives described the emotional void left by Doug's sudden death, highlighting how holidays, birthdays, and everyday milestones had transformed into moments of acute absence. Friends and acquaintances recalled Doug as a man of principle, a father deeply invested in his child's life, whose loss created both immediate sorrow and long-term psychological impact. Meanwhile, Ashley's life behind bars began under the strict routines of the correctional system. Media reports indicate that her days now consist of regimented schedules, monitored interactions, and the daily reality of confinement. Public curiosity remained high as her story, the Black Swan murder trial, continued to dominate news cycles and social media discussions. The trial and its outcome provoked polarized reactions. On one hand, some observers viewed Ashley as a woman overwhelmed by circumstances, caught in the pressures of custody disputes, estrangement, and personal stress. Advocates for domestic violence victims highlighted her claims of emotional abuse and the alleged coercive behavior she experienced, framing her narrative within the context of controlling relationships and the broader societal challenges of domestic conflict. On the other hand, critics argued that the premeditated nature of the shooting, the careful control of the environment, and Ashley's actions during and immediately after the incident reflected intentionality and deliberation. These perspectives fueled debates over the adequacy of the justice system in distinguishing between self-defense claims and acts of calculated violence. Media outlets traced every detail of the case, reporting on the public filings, courtroom testimony, and statements from both family members and legal professionals. The coverage extended beyond traditional news formats, with discussion forums, podcasts, and social media threads examining Ashley's psychological profile, her ballet background, the custody disputes, and her relationship dynamics with Doug. The case prompted broader discussions on domestic violence and mental health. Legal experts and social commentators questioned whether existing systems, protective orders, custody enforcement, and conflict resolution mechanisms sufficiently prevented escalation. Observers asked whether earlier interventions, counseling, or mediation could have changed the trajectory of events, and whether the combination of age difference, rapid marriage, and custody contention created conditions that made violence more likely. Additionally, theories emerged about the psychological pressures leading to the fatal act. Some commentators suggested that Ashley's history as a disciplined ballerina, accustomed to precision and control, influenced her approach to conflict, manifesting in highly calculated and strategic behaviors. Others explored the dynamics of estrangement, power struggles over parental rights, and the impact of perceived betrayal on decision-making under stress. Despite the court's verdict, questions linger. Was the sentence sufficient to provide justice for Doug Benefield and his family? Did the system fail to prevent the confrontation that led to his death? And what long-term effects would Ashley's incarceration have on her child, her family, and the community at large? The answers remain uncertain, leaving observers and the public to consider how domestic disputes can escalate beyond recognition, and how warning signs might be identified before tragedy strikes. This chapter of the story reminds us that the consequences of domestic conflict extend far beyond the immediate victims. Even as Ashley serves her sentence, Doug's family must reconstruct their lives around absence, grief, and the challenge of ensuring stability for a young child who witnessed the unraveling of her family. The community, too, grapples with the broader implications: how to recognize dangerous patterns, how to intervene safely, and how to support those living in situations where control, manipulation, and escalating disputes may conceal the risk of violence. Tonight, we pause to reflect on the tragedy that unfolded between Ashley and Doug Benefield. A marriage that began with promise, quick devotion, and a shared vision of family life ended not with reconciliation or understanding, but with death, sorrow, and a legal reckoning that would ripple through their community and their child's life. The room in Lakewood Ranch where Doug took his final breath, a place once meant for familial safety and ordinary moments, became the stage for an event that no parent, child, or friend could have anticipated. Doug Benefield, a Navy veteran and devoted father, a man whose life had been defined by service, duty, and care for his child, was struck down in a single moment of violence. Ashley, a former ballerina with dreams of artistic mastery and a reputation for discipline and precision, found herself at the center of the legal storm that would become the Black Swan murder trial. The juxtaposition of their past, a life seemingly full of opportunity and promise, with the ultimate violence that occurred in her mother's home, leaves us questioning the hidden dynamics that may have been at play, the pressures that escalated quietly until the final, irreversible act. As viewers, we are left to consider not just the immediate consequences, but the warning signs that preceded the act. Custody disputes, accusations of emotional abuse, allegations of coercion, and the high stakes surrounding parental control. All these elements combined in a sequence of events that culminated in tragedy. Were there moments where intervention, dialogue, or systemic support could have changed the trajectory of that day? Could Doug's life have been spared if the disputes had been mediated differently, or if the courts, friends, or family had recognized the dangerous escalation of tension? These are questions that linger far beyond the courtroom, challenging us to reflect on the broader societal and relational lessons embedded in this case. In contemplating the outcome, we also turn our attention to the child, the silent witness in all of this. Though physically absent during the fatal confrontation, the ramifications of this event will be lifelong. The disruption of parental presence, the psychological imprint of losing a father, and the complex emotions surrounding the mother's conviction form a constellation of consequences that extend beyond immediate tragedy. This case reminds us that domestic disputes, no matter how private or controlled they seem, can have devastating, multi-generational effects. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, reach out for help immediately. You are not alone. Resources are available to provide support, safety, and guidance. And for those watching this story unfold, consider the lessons it offers: the importance of recognizing warning signs, the necessity of early intervention, and the need to prioritize the safety of vulnerable individuals before conflicts escalate beyond control. If you believe this story should be shared to raise awareness and educate others on the gravity of domestic violence and the warning signs that preceded, please like this video, subscribe to Bruised Voice, and share it with friends, family, and your community. Engagement on these stories ensures that others may learn, reflect, and act to prevent similar tragedies. Join the Bruised Voice community, where we continue to bring these real-life narratives to light, amplifying the voices of those who can no longer speak for themselves, and exploring the human and societal factors that can turn love into devastation. Through awareness, discussion, and reflection, we can honor Doug Benefield's memory and help protect those still at risk.